Perhaps the most famous archaeological site in Mexico is Teotihuacan, and within it there's what's called the Avenue of the Dead. But did it really have to do with the dead? And who gave it this name, in this case? You will discover all on this shortly. If you've been able to visit Teotihuacan, you surely walk along this avenue called the Avenue of the Dead. But if not, in its current state, it measures 2 kilometers in length. Obviously, during its heyday, it measured more than double that. Archaeologists suggest it could have been 5 kilometers long. When photographs emerged, an interest in studying the city, not just the avenue, arose. The entire city was practically buried. In fact, crops were planted on top of the avenue, which were gradually removed to reconstruct it as we see in its northern part. The southern part still needs reconstruction. However, this is a good example of how sometimes we take certain facts for granted, passed down from generation to generation, without them being truly accurate. Indeed, archaeologists, anthropologists, tour guides, and information sources refer to it this way. But the Avenue of the Dead is a name used in the Spanish language, so what was its original name? The oldest known name is Micaotli, or Path of the Dead, according to colonial chronicles. However, Micaotli is a Nahuatl word, just like Teotihuacan. To this day, we have no idea what language the supposed Teotihuacanos spoke. In fact, Teotihuacan is not even its true name. So, who gave Teotihuacan its name and, in the case of Micaotli, the now Spanish Avenue of the Dead? The answer lies with the Mexicas, a Nahuatl-speaking group. These names were given to the city and the urban axis many hundreds of years after the city was abandoned. This fact proves that there were unknown aspects even among these groups themselves. In the absence of certainty, myths and legends filled the gaps. The Avenue of the Dead was a creation of the Mexicas. But then, were there justifications for giving it this name? Indeed, there are several justifications from the Mexica worldview. For starters, the Mexicas never knew the inhabitants of the city, and in fact, had they known them, they might have been rivals, just as they were with the Purépechas, Tlaxcaltecas and other groups during their time. The Mexicas migrated from the north to the center of what is now Mexico. Along their journey, they encountered the city in ruins and covered by vegetation. In their imagination, they thought it was a great causeway, and the mounds on its sides were nothing less than tombs. This led them to believe that this was a grand road upon which great figures or even deities might have been buried. If we consider the legend of the 5 sons, which speaks of the birth of the 50th son of the Mexicas, many deities, starting with Nanahuatl in Antecusistecatl, were sacrificed in the remains of the city, creating the sun and the moon, and marking the beginning of the 50th era. So, in their minds, they might have even thought that these mounds were where these deities that created the world were buried. Of course, this belief was false, because the mounds were actually buildings, each consisting of various rooms. However, over the centuries, the stones were either stolen, or these buildings collapsed, leaving the main bodies of the structures, which were covered by vegetation, appear to be tombs. But these beliefs about tombs are not the only justifications for linking this avenue to death. Based on how the Mexicas divided temporal and spatial aspects, they consider the north to be associated with death. Thus, the avenue of the dead is oriented south-north, and the north end was associated with the setting sun, which is their cosmology represented death and the underworld. In conclusion, the Mexicas, with their unique worldview and imaginative interpretation, play a significant role in naming the Avenue of the Dead in Teotihuacan, even though it did not originally have such a morbid association. It is possible that this belief was also influenced by the layout of the city, which has a quadrangular design. In Mexica beliefs, there were special places at each of their 4 cardinal points. To the east, there was Tlahuistlampa. To the west, Cihuatlampa. In the south, there was Huistlampa, and in the north, Mictlampa. Mictlampa translates to the place of rest, or in a more vulgar concept, the place of death. For them, the north was the direction of death, the place where most of the dead went. This idea was not arbitrary because precisely they and others migrated from the northern part of the continent to the south, in search of better living conditions. According to their beliefs, they thought that there could only be a desert to the north, and in a desert there were few options for obtaining food. With food scarcity, that naturally occurred, marking the north an undesirable place to be. Thus, for these and other reasons, they assigned the northern direction as the location of Mictlan. Everything fit into their mindset. We see a great avenue flanked by supposed tombs, which, like a procession, goes from south to north. The avenue ends in front of what the Mexicas also call the Pyramid of the Moon. This avenue served as the necessary path that the dead had to traverse to reach Mictlan, which was located to the north. Even this avenue may have served as the basis for the emergency of Tezcatlipoca, who ruled the northern direction where Mictlan was located. Why is this said? It's because there is a surviving mural today that features a puma over this avenue. While the puma is not a jaguar, typically associated with Tezcatlipoca. It might have fueled the belief that Tezcatlipoca, in the form of a vilaya, was located to the north, as the northern pole star. So, for all these reasons, we cannot blame them for calling it Micaotli or the Road of the Dead. However, beyond the city's cardinal point structuring and the fact that the avenue is oriented from south to north, there is no evidence to prove that the city's true inhabitants call this avenue Micaotli. As we mentioned, the supposed tombs were remains or buildings, with around 80 different types and sizes of platforms along the avenue. Until now, there is no evidence that Nahuatl was the dominant language of the city. There is also no evidence that the creation myths the Mexicas claim to have occurred in the city were true, especially the one related to the creation of the 50th sun. But of course, they took a lot from the city. Its orientations, architectural styles, and various artifacts they found. They analyzed astronomical phenomena related to the sunrises and sunsets throughout the year, as the avenue's north-south orientation aligns with the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. Many buildings constructed throughout the city made astronomical measurements throughout the year. These measurements, apart from having secret and ritual aspects, serve as systems or measurement for harvests, dividing the year into dry and rainy seasons, and as indicators for planting and harvesting. In simple terms, the avenue acted as a giant ruler that helped them measure time, especially as the sun passed over the avenue throughout the year. There are many other aspects we may never know, but it's understandable why they invented a name related to death and the dead. Even today we know very little about this culture. Hence, we can understand the fascination myths and unknown knowledge that the Mexicas gleaned from this place. So the Avenue of the Dead or Micaotli, in truth, is not what the Mexicas thought it to be. But in the Mexica imagination, it was path where the journey of those destined to die concluded, where the would-be transmuted to the realm of the dead. From this place, they learned much. However, we will never know what its original creators called it, or its true purposes.